Welcome to the Compromised to Alchemized podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Neil Bolton-Donnie. I'm excited as you join me in this journey to listen to my conversations with some of the leading experts in the field of healing from a broad range of disciplines. Okay, hello. Welcome everybody to the Compromised to Alchemized podcast with Neil Bolton-Donnie, and my guest today that you'll be hearing from is Holly, and she's in Sarasota, and she's got a really phenomenal name, Holistic Alchemist. I just love it, and I think that we have so many things that we share in terms of the kind of work that we do, and the way we love to help people. But obviously, we share the alchemy part in our names. So I'm just taking a few minutes to intro our conversation. And this is after the fact, of course. So the conversation that we had, it was originally going to be through my StreamYard platform. So you'll hear, because it ended up just being Instagram Live that we did just with cells. But it was still a really great conversation, really fun. And just note that the sound will be a little different because of not having the platform going up. So, but yeah, really good time. So we actually just kind of asked each other some questions, talked a little bit about how, in one way we have met, but I think we kind of really focused in on like our shared love of music and sound. Of course, that was a lead in to talk about frequency, bioresonance technology. We're talking about many things, but we use the AO scan is the instrument or tool that we both use. And then, of course, I talk about how I use it with patients and also how I've used it with guided releases for tongue-tie releases. But Holly also talks about how she uses it. So it's really great conversation, the first of more. So for anybody who, you want to know more about Holly, you can visit her on Holistic Alchemist on Instagram. Of course, you know where I'm at. And yeah, stay tuned for a good episode on some of these points. I go into a little bit about my history, how I even got into ultra running before we had our first child. That led me into, of course, the ultra running helped me defeat asthma, but then having a daughter with a tongue tie led me into the work that I'm doing today. So we paint the picture a little bit. And then, yeah, stay tuned for another episode where Holly and I get together and talk again. All right, enjoy. Okay, so tell me, are you in Bradenton right now?
Yes, I am.
That's where you are. Okay, I love Bradenton in Sarasota. Haven't been there in a long time, but it's been a while. So,
where in California are you?
I'm in Santa Barbara, so just at the office. I practice out of a myofunctional therapist office. Her name's Nicole Cantello, Santa Barbara Myo. And there we go. Yeah, so we've been here for 5 months. We moved from Redding, California, which is like way up at the top of the state. And loving it. Just like 4-minute walk from the ocean, 5-minute walk from a forest preserve. It's like so many moments have led to this time where we're here, so it's so nice.
That's so good. Awesome. Good for you guys.
Yeah. And then boy, so you're in so I feel like this is really cool because we get to meet each other and get to know each other, and then
invite everybody else to be a part of the meeting.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean,
that's a first for me.
What's that?
That's a first for me to have if you're not hearing me okay, I do have headphones and I can
You're good. I just like I was on mute and you're like, why am I not hearing you? I'm like, well, because I was on mute. I didn't have your volume turned up loud enough. So I'm good. The technical difficulties, right? Well, I call this, I didn't even add, this is all extemporaneous, like spontaneous in some ways. And I'm not sure exactly like the timeline, but it's not that far back when we it's just like a few weeks ago or something when we connected. But
But I've been seeing like some of your like posts and first of all, I love the play on words with the first part of your name.
Thank
Like,
you.
just love that.
Thank you.
And yeah, I feel like what kind of like what drew us, I think, to want to connect was talking about frequency. Like, but we have a lot of other like cool overlaps with like the cranial, craniosacral in craniosacral fascial world.
Totally.
So I called this, without asking you, I just called this the alchemy of sound or frequency, purpose, and healing. Because I
I
feel
saw
like,
that and I was like, oh, that's good. I didn't, it's like very good. Yeah. And I'm excited to hear like the way that you use the AO scan, with your people. And, I just started connecting with you. So I saw that
Mhm.
you work with infants and that drew me to you, I think. And I think you and Dr. Morrow Zapatera had a talk. And so that
Yeah,
also was okay. All right, cool. So how long have you been doing what you do?
yeah. Well, so I started like in the healing field 17 years ago as a chiropractor.
Okay.
And I'd like to say that was like a whole new world to me. Was a molecular biology guy that did chemistry, and I didn't like any of that. So, but then kind of like that's the first portal I went through was through the chiropractic um, field, and
Hmm.
then
I
nine
love that
years
you call it a
ago,
portal.
yeah, it's
It's so true.
it's like a reality shifting moment, and I also like to think of them as event horizons, like. I love
Mm,
space and thinking about that, but down to real life where we are here on Earth, I feel like for me a grounding and beautiful moment was the birth of my wife's name is Dawn, and then we have three kids. And when our first was born 9 years ago, that was another portal event horizon. Well,
mhm,
so many ways, so many beautiful ways, and then that whole journey was like, well, she was born, and she was born with a tongue tie, and our midwife spotted it. She came up out of the water really serene. Her name is Serenity. We named her 11 days after she was born because we felt like
mhm,
we knew her in that moment. And
mhm.
then, but yeah, that's really what threw me into that like vortex of like challenge, pain, especially seeing my wife go through that pain, but then also Serenity go through that pain of like not being able to latch properly and being painful for both of them. Then all of the associated like discomfort when all they're trying to do is like we're trying to get this little baby to get nourished and flourish, and then that's such a problem. So that's what really led me into like delve deeper into I was already working intuitively and like working on like cranials and fascial strains and
Mhm.
organs and just seeing like people get better, but
Yeah.
that wasn't working with Serenity. So
Mhm.
not only did we go down the rabbit hole of getting a tongue tie release, and that was like night and day difference,
Mhm.
but then we went through that separate thing of like, okay, that did so much, but it didn't take care of everything. And then what did I need to do as a dad and a, you know, healer to like help? So I
Mm.
think it was like through that journey that I really fell into like this more like pressing, compelling, like what really like drives me forward to keep furthering knowing more and more about this. And I think that was I was thinking about like very loosely about how um sound has been such a significant journey for me in life.
Mhm.
And like I know we have probably like a half an hour or so with our times to
You're
talk.
okay. You're okay. We can go
So
a little over 11.
yeah, I won't go super in depth, but I'll just say, because it was like, oh, you know, I can't talk about any of the beauty of like what, because of Serenity's this problem, like, oh, now I found how I could help her and help a lot of other babies, kids, and adults. But I have to go back to like, but that was so hard. And I would in an instant, I would prefer not to have that happen. I'm
100%.
not like I don't look at the past wishing I could change it now. I
Mhm.
more like am like, okay, I'm gonna say thank God that we were able to make it through. But I'm not a big fan of saying, but that was for a reason, because no, it happened, and I wouldn't recreate that. However, but I remember we had a miscarriage before Serenity, and that was incredibly painful, especially for my wife, and then us, and losing that. It was 10-week gestation. So,
Mm, so,
um, and
yeah.
and there was like this moment of like the loss and the grieving, which then led me to repaint our office furniture. And because I'm not a good painter, it took me 50 hours to do 4 coats of fuchsia paint and black and white paint over the other things. But I started
Mm.
listening to a podcast, the Ritual podcast about ultra running, and I started to run when I couldn't run, horrible asthma, and that was how I overcame asthma and could run an two ultra marathons within like 9 months. But my motivation was the coming um, birth I knew we would have. I'm like, we are gonna have another baby. We are going to have one, and then Dawn got pregnant, and along the journey, I started to listen. We started to record the Doppler heartbeats at the midwife appointments. So I took
Mhm.
those and I made those into like 1 minute tracks, and I put them on a soundtrack. So I would run to the rhythm of Serenity's heartbeat. And
Oh.
not only did that help me when I was training for the ultras, which wasn't really about training for ultras, it was about defeating a lifelong battle with asthma that was taking away my ability to be me, but also looking to having a kid. I'm like, I want to be able to run, jump, climb a tree, run around and play with our kids. Like, there's no way I want to be stuck on a couch wheezing for a half an hour after running for 3 minutes, right? I
Mhm.
had dealt with asthma since I was 4, grew up like a bubble boy, and then so we had Serenity um, 9 years ago, and so it was on that pregnancy journey where I started to listen to those tracks and get acclimated to the sound of her heart. And the little gestating heartbeat is like super fast, right? So it's like
Mhm. Mhm.
so when
Mhm.
I was running through the valley in California, the way too cool 50K 31 miler, my first like ultra that I did, like when I was like feeling so tired and exhausted, uh, it was like right at the right time that the 1 minute track would come on of that certain part of the heart rate. So Serenity's heart would keep me going, the cadence of her heartbeat. And so I was, just like running to the rhythm of her heartbeat taught me how to prepare to be a dad, but it also taught me how to like overcome. And so that sound, her heartbeat, was like so influential in like how I would look at her, and even look at her now when I'm like, I remember your heartbeat guiding my feet. And
Yeah.
now I have to be so present, because if I think that I can rest on the laurels of what I did then, that's not going to work. So it's a struggle to be constant and present and all of that, but it's the sound. And so it was kind of like, probably when I look at like, why did frequency make its way into the work that I did with her and with
Mm.
others, and why did I stumble across the AO scan years later? I'm like, well, for sure some of that was the sound of her heartbeat, I would say.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And you're kind of making things come to my awareness too, because sound has always been a big thing for me too, but more in that um, I sang growing up. I was very musical. I loved all of that. And in somewhere along the way, I think just between different moves and things like that, I think when we finally moved to Florida when I was in high school, like I would find myself humming to songs in class, and the kids be like, "You have a voice. Like, why aren't you, and it was like this hidden thing. Like, even a
Mm.
lot of my friends now probably don't know that I sing. I haven't done it in a long time. I live in an apartment, so there's a lot of like, I don't want my people to like hear me. I don't want to, so there's a lot of that too. And then my son has also taken up quite a bit and doesn't want, the noise. And so I don't get to sing the way, but my point to that is frequency and sound. I mean, even just when I think back to being a teenager and in my 20s, like, sound is what moved through so many tough times in my life. Like I would just sit there and listen. Like we don't really do the same thing with music anymore, but you make such a good, valid point that's like bringing up things. And I'm like, wow, yeah, it makes total sense that this would have made its way into my arena too. And I'm sorry to hear about the experience that you had. That's a very tough journey and also very beautiful with your daughter's heartbeat. I think that's just gorgeous. What a beautiful metaphor and physical story that you could bring to the
Well,
picture.
thanks for you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's like, never, I wasn't really thinking about all of that when we were going to talk, but thanks for holding space for that. First of all, I appreciate that. And I really love hearing about the way you're reflecting on the moments of singing that you have. Like, so this is where I joke and I say, well, I didn't, well, now we're going to have you do a song. I'm just kidding. I'm not going
Yeah.
to make you do that.
Yeah,
Maybe
now that
next
the
time.
maintenance just walked into the office too. It'll be perfect. I'll just break out into dance and song, no
Right.
problem.
Maybe next time I'll lay down some beatbox tracks. I'm an amateur beatboxer, but I'll lay
Yeah.
down some beatbox tracks and you can freestyle over it.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. We don't know. But
But
I
on
love
that
that.
note too, it's even brought up a lot with like diaphragm stuff, right? Like I've
Yeah.
noticed, and you probably have too, like nobody's breathing right, right? And I've noticed it even with myself. I'm like, oh my, I never was taught to sing, but I have been listening to, do you know, I don't know if you follow her, musical breathwork.
Yeah,
I think her name is
totally.
Brooke. And I just
Yeah.
love the stuff that she puts in together. And like, I'm just like,
Uh-huh.
oh, yes, right. But I just happen to think that it's amazing when she brings up certain things about like how, you know, you sing and and I'm like, how that stimulates it all plays in together
Yeah.
and the frequency. And I'm just like, oh yeah, it all plays in. It all had to naturally be a part of the full equation.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, I love her stuff, and also, yeah, you mentioned Melrose Zapatera earlier, and she's also done a connection
Oh,
with him.
right.
Yeah, so
Right.
yeah, we'll have to plan a hangout with at least a few of us. But I
Yeah.
remember, yeah, when I interviewed Mauro on my podcast, at that time it was called embryology, and it was a play on words, but it had to do with gestation, and he's also like a lot in terms of research and what he puts out there. He's got tons on embryology, and that's how that really informs my work and how I work with all ages. But yeah, the diaphragm, like, when people ask me, like, what kind of breath work, and I'm like, well, yeah, we can go box breathing, we can go Wim Hof, we can go Buteyko, we can go all those things. But if you want to ask me, like, what my favorite form of breath work is, it is singing. Because it's like I didn't know that I was a singer. I did, but I was really shy, and I had those words over me. And then in high school, I joined. I auditioned for a musical, and you had to, sing for it, and I got everybody in the class was like, "We didn't even know you talked, Neil, let alone sing." So they wanted an encore, and then
Yeah.
I did the song again, and then I joined the choir, and then I'm like, okay, I'm found. I am found. So there's, like you said it. There's key moments in life where, for me, when I could hear my sound come out in the way that my brain and heart wanted it to. Not only do 5% of our brain works by sound, so, those sound waves retrain your brain. But I also felt like when I heard myself with that certain timbre, like, it helped me know that I was there. So sound has brought me through some rough, tough moments, and it's been revolutionary for me. And that's just singing. Obviously, I love music and created music and all of those things too. But it's like the vocal instrument is so profound. And so when somebody asks me, like, what's your breath work? I'm like, I sing, because you know that when you make that sound and you have the elements of getting that right amount of air through, and it vibrates with those vocal cords, and it's like, it for me, I have the satisfaction of, like, it made a sound better than the sound that I was singing 2 minutes ago when I wasn't using my diaphragm. So I love, like, the body being an instrument, and
Mhm.
finally tuning our own. But yeah, help being the privilege of being able to finally tune other people's instruments, and, like, those are moments that I view as, like, beautiful, sacred, and there's so much fun. So yeah, I love the
Totally. And I feel like we go through the things that we go through in our life so that we can.
yeah, totally.
Sorry,
Um,
Instagram was telling me something about hand
okay.
gestures.
Oh no, right. Boy, it does what it does. Okay. Well, yeah, you were saying like we go through the some of the things
Hmm.
and yeah. I've seen you use the word transmute in one of your posts.
Hmm.
Um, and I love that because you're talking about trauma
Hmm.
in transmuting. So, first of all, I love the word transmute and I use it in a way. And then I want to ask you about the way you use it. But when I talk about embryology, and there's like a cool picture of showing how this baby, forms, and I call them that we're in our amnio suits and we're tethered to our, via the space cord to
Well,
the womb and the placenta, which is our supply, which is an
right,
astronomical term, right?
right.
And then we travel through, um, and we are uteronauts at that time, not anymore, right? Uteronauts making it through, and eventually we come, hopefully, to that pelvic brim of our moms. We come to the pelvic brim, and we go through that event horizon, and we transmute reality from in to out in the world, and where we manifest on the earth to live our lives and follow our purpose. But I think transmute can mean so much more than just change locations, because of course it does. So yeah, can you
Hmm.
tell us, like, when you say that with like transmute trauma, like what does that bring to your mind? And like,
I think the first word that comes to mind for that is really just another word for alchemizing. And that
yeah,
was pretty much, the whole purpose of the reason for the name. But I
yeah,
just felt like my personal experiences had led me to being able to see that there was definitely a period where I was in my like victimhood of what I was going through. And I think that's a really necessary part of the whole process. You can't just bypass that as much as, but it's very easy, I think, to get stuck in that. And there was something that just shifted through craniosacral work that
hmm
allowed me to see that my body could alchemize this. I could get through this and get to the other side. And then through that, there's this whole new perspective, and it is truly like a transmutation of what you once thought. You just don't see things the same way, you don't operate the same way, your frequency is likely very shifted, and you are yeah, you're transmuting what I like to use the analogy of is like a black box, being given a black box and alchemizing that into something beautiful. And that is what it feels like my experience was. And I don't think I went through that just to go through it. Like it feels like it was
hmm
very much a part of but only if I was able to see that and get through it, like it could have been messy, could have gotten stuck there. And I think there are people that do, but those are one of those catalytic moments that bring you to one of the portals that open up for you on your journey, that show you how you can be of service and give that back to others.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, yeah, you were saying like with your name, holistic alchemy, which
Mhm.
again, so cool.
Thank
The
you.
play on words is so good, and but I think that is one of the reasons I was like, oh yeah, I love that, the name. And then I looked and saw a little bit, like read a little bit, and like saw it went to what it meant to you. And I feel like my I had similar. The compromised to alchemized. The reason I changed it from embryology, which is like I love. There's a JI at the end of embryology. That's not the traditional spelling. JI is the thing. Like we call my dad for our kids. We say Dada G. That's how you say grandfather in Hindi. And
Mhm.
so my parents from India, and so we would say to our kids, like, okay, that's Dadaji and Dadi Ma. So the JI at the end is like honor the dad. That's what this technical term means. But I
Mhm.
was like, like to honor the embryo. And yes, to honor the one who is born and honor the one like who gave birth to that. So, to
Right.
this beautiful thing that happens. It's where, magical mind bending thing called birth. And so um, but there was another that I was dialoguing with my wife about it. But then there was this moment where I'm like, I feel like I need to go broader than that. So I was saying, how can we? This is in the middle of many other musings where I said, how can we go from compromised airways to alchemized airways? By airway, I really mean like airway and feeding. So
Mhm.
for babies,
Mhm.
I talk a lot more about feeding. I'm like, yes, we need air and oxygen is important, but like, but we're really like getting that precious milk in whatever way is such a pivotal thing.
Hmm.
So I make a big point to say like airway centered care is great, but we need airway feeding centered care, and there's much more than that. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah.
um, but how can we go from compromised airways to alchemized airway? And then Dawn was like, "What if you just drop the other words and say compromise to alchemize?" I'm like, yeah, because it's so much more. And it
Hmm.
is. Because how can we go from compromise to alchemize? And compromise is like suffering, broken, and we all have been there, to alchemized. And, it's like taking that iron or lead into, like in the Alchemist, which is one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah.
And how can we turn this substance that's not shiny, that's heavy, that's, burdensome, and turn it into this shiny, precious, valuable element that's
Hmm.
also soft, dense, and which is gold. That's not a linear journey, and it
Hmm.
doesn't take like go do lactation and then get a tongue tie release and then you're good, or go get myofunctional therapy and go get like the body work and then we're good. It's like a lot of times, yeah, don't get it is the beauty of craniosacral. It is the beauty of so many other modes of healing that we're into, frequencies and music. But it's like it also takes a village, and it takes like
Totally.
coming together and to validate, affirm, and do things that only non-linear forms of support, like being there for somebody and being a friend to somebody, like we need that from others and we need to give that. Like
Yeah.
that's for so I haven't really shared about that part as in depth, but I'm like that's part of where the alchemy happens. It's
Yeah.
like being humans and loving in a way that sometimes we can get lost in this whole equation.
Totally. Totally. I was just explaining how driving on the roads around here lately is like the anti of what I feel in my heart. And when I'm on the road, I'm in like fight or flight, I'm in defense, and I
Mhm.
don't, that's not, and I feel like so many people live in that state and then they forget that we're not the road raging people on the road. Like we're not the defensive people against the road raging people on the road. We're human beings. And,
Yeah.
you know, this person just went through a whole lot of stuff with their kids this morning, the same as you did. And, it's like, I don't know. I've learned a lot about compassion, and just the way that people process things differently, and just holding that space for people because we all are just like, at different points of our journey. And there's just so much judgment and clashing. And I think we saw a whole lot of that a few years back. And that was like just so hard to witness. And then to just go, okay, like this is like where this was coming from was like a fear vibration, again, like a frequency of, and how that can be different, how that's much different than like the love vibration and compassion and forgiveness, and how all those things really are, they do carry a different frequency that your body responds to. It's funny you bring up the alchemist, and it just brought me right back to being in Aruba. And I just connected with somebody who, with the man I'm with now, and I know that he was reading The Alchemist, and I had meant to read it.
Hmm.
I still have yet to read it,
Hmm.
but it was sitting on this table at the resort. I went to go get food, and the person, whoever was there, wasn't there. And I just remember seeing it, and it was the Spanish version. So it was like,
I love that.
whatever. And I was like, oh, and I have a picture of it somewhere because for whatever reason I decided to take a picture. And in this moment, while you said that, I was like, oh, because this was years and years and years ago. But if you fast forward, I'm like, there was such an alchemistic thing that was happening in my life at that time. And if I look at that, it was such a pivotal moment. And I was just thinking about the name of my company, this morning, I think, and I was just laughing to myself how like I'm so happy that like that's how it, because I didn't think of that per se. It just like
Yeah.
came to me, and I was
Yeah.
like, perfect. Like
Yeah.
that's what it should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, you just made me realize like how all of that has played into like so much.
Yeah.
Is definitely that book was meant to be seen, let's just put it that way.
I love that. Oh, that's so good. I love those like origin kind of like points of reference, especially when it's such an important thing and where you met this man and
Mhm.
and then and like you can come back to that moment. I was like, I mean, I'm not doing this for like, I wish I had the Spanish version, but of course, like, you know, I carry this with me. I just, well, I've had a couple versions, but and I remember reading it, and it was so transformative. Just, you know, the story um, but I was like, I want to use this in like everything, and I was like journaling and mapping about it, and like, you know, and but then I'm like, you know, this just gets to be a part of who I am. It doesn't have to make it into my like Instagram post or whatever. But then it was years later that I uttered that phrase aloud, and I'm like, then it clicked, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I get to have this book that's way more than a book, um, and what it's meant to me, because I always carry it with me when I travel, and I'm not always going to read it, but it's in my bag. And when I pull it out and I flip to a page, I'm like, ah. And it is about the book, and it is about the author Paulo Coelho, and it's about, I even have like music. I listen to an album that really is specific. Well, it's called anyways, it's a really good album, but um and I kind of like inextricably link the sound of that album to this book, because it's a very ethereal, energetic, you know, it's mostly instrumental with some loose vocals. So for me, that lets me sink in and let it be a theme song and a soundtrack. So,
Yeah.
you know, I've had other people read it and they're like, oh, it was cool. I just don't know if I'm getting from it what it seems like you got. I'm like, you don't need to. That doesn't need to be your thing. But for me, it was really significant. So it's just as much about like having the shared experiences in my life, but then also meeting others like you. So you'll also, I made my mug, my
I
compromise to
saw that.
alchemized mug, and then look at this. This is the alchemical signs for lead into gold, and then
Uh,
when I drink, that says personal legend. And personal
Great.
legend is actually like a really significant term in the book, but you know, really what it means is like legend is like on a map where you have in the corner, and it
Mhm.
shows you how far you've gone and things like that, but it's more about like purpose, and you said so much about purpose kind of in some of that. But I have to ask you, like, just in case we don't, I mean, I would love to do a part two or whatever it
I
is.
know, me too. I was thinking that. I was like, we're gonna have to do a part two.
We've got to do a part two. So what I love to ask though is like, you kind of said it in there, but just in case, like, what is your personal legend? Like, what's written on you, and what is needing to come through you? And it could be like something that's been that for you, or you could say like it's been this. However, like I'm in the middle of alchemy in that, and but whatever it is, like what is that thing that's written on you that you know you need to exude into the world, and stream through?
So it feels like my voice has always been an important thing. Like, so even when I was younger, like I sang, and I still think like that's something that will probably be a continuing journey that I'm gonna like rediscover in my adulthood. Like, I just feel that. But
Love it. Yeah.
that being said, it's shifted where like my voice has been more used for like voicing. I feel like there's a lot of bridges that I am fortunate enough to see because of the experiences I've gone through. You know, like we had a tough experience with my son's birth, with the latching, all of that. And I did not know what I know now then,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And so, you know, in thinking about having another kid now, it's like I'm processing all the things that you were talking about and all the things that I feel like made a difference in my fascial system for giving birth. And anyways, I mention all of that to say that I see a lot of things that have been presented in my life experience, not for just me to hold on to, but for me to talk about, for me to share. So for right now, that voice is that. But I do think at some point, not that I like plan on becoming an opera singer or anything, but I do think that at some point I'm going to learn more about how it's all connected. Like that's how I'm figuring out. And I feel like that journey is just going to become more well-rounded when I fully understand like, oh, my diaphragm, and like let me get into the frequency of what I'm doing in the science. And like you were even just mentioning something about the music you play when you read. And I'm like, oh, you put yourself into like an entrainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought how awesome that is, because that's even something that I think about doing with my sessions. Like I still don't know that I have found like the right music soundtrack, but for right now there's one thing that I keep playing, and I feel like by the time I get into the third song when I'm in a session with adults, it's like that song in particular, the way that it tunes in the xylophone and the little ripples of water, like there in a zone. They are between the work going on, and it's a combination of the work. And I'm like, I love this so much. And it reminds me of when I was in my 20s and I would burn CDs
Hmm.
specifically for parties with the entire, like, this is the vibe I want.
Totally.
It's,
Yeah,
I
I
wouldn't
love
do all
that.
of that now, but like, it just shows me how that's always played in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, for me, I think the legend would be continuing to use my voice and sharpening that in however that's supposed to be utilized, because I do think that's a strong part of my journey.
Yeah, I love that. And which you just brought up to mind, one of my like way back in the day friends, him and his wife, and I made them I burned them a CD when I was still single, and I was like, hey, hanging out with them a lot, and I made them an album, and I called it Digital Ovaltine. Ovaltine is like the
Yeah,
old school
yeah.
drink, and you think like throwback, and like
Yeah.
what does everybody do? They gather around and they drink their Ovaltine. I never did, right? But I was like, somehow this feels like Digital Ovaltine. Like you listen to this, and this is going to be like that nourishing drink that brings you two together as a couple. I was always doing things like that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, then flip it up to sound in the healing room is so significant. I have like things that I played in different seasons, from
Mhm.
the Abundant Human Elements, which is like an amazing track. Was two guys that did that together. And it's a known album, and it's like the elements of the body, and it's
Mm.
music that's tunes those elements. And I've had countless moments where I've felt the calibration on a subatomic level.
Yes.
Um, but then nowadays I'm like, I love the piano guys, and they have a song called Evening Prayer, which just puts me into tears every time. And
Mhm.
so some of my most beautiful moments in the room are when I'm doing sessions and that comes on, because I let it be a curated Pandora for right now, right?
Yeah.
And I've gone through playing different albums, and so I love that. For me, music and sound is one of the most important parts of me. So
Mhm.
I know that in the years to come, I'll do more of that. But right
Mhm.
now, I'm like, I get to be that, DJ to play the music that. And so when I'm in the room and I'm like, okay, and I'm like, okay, this sound is really agitating me, but I don't know why. And then I'm like, this sound doesn't seem so good. And the person's like, totally. I'm like, all right, let's change it.
Yeah.
And if I feel it at all, and they're like, I was kind of liking it. I'm like, yeah, but I think your heart rate was going up, and we're trying to loosen fascia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go the other way.
Yeah.
But then I was gonna say, like, well, I know I want to talk just briefly. I don't feel like I want to like talk in depth about anything unless it's in the flow. But with the AO scan, I know we kind of like started talking about that, and like
Mhm.
I have used the AO scan in a lot of ways. And the AO scan is, oh, what is it? Just so anybody wants to know what it is, like this is the handheld version of it with bone conduction headphones, and it's a really good frequency device that can be used. The old system that existed before this, I got this when it first came out.
Cool.
But when it before that, it was like a uh, 25 or $30,000 machine.
Right.
And I've used Rife machines, and I've used a lot of frequency devices, and I like them all. But I really loved how this is like portable,
Mhm.
and for me, it was like made it super easy to use.
Mhm.
And one of the things I liked about it is when you do one of the really like simple scans on there, and people can put those bone conduction headphones on. And I'm saying it so that some people who are looking that don't know what this is can
Yeah.
like
Yeah. They're like
so
picture.
you
Yeah.
you do this, and then it not only tunes in, um, and there's different data you put into the machine. It also picks up things from your temporal nerves. So let's just say that it tunes into your biorhythms,
Mhm.
um, and it accesses some of brain function, and then it comprises, or it makes up certain frequencies that are from an existing library, but that are tuned specifically to you and what you need that day, not only physically, but also often on a nervous system regulation and an emotional state, so
Right.
that you can then, like, if I do that with somebody, then I can like quickly email them the few files, and they can listen to certain files.
Right.
So sometimes I'll play those tracks in the room when I'm working on people, and it's
Mhm.
cool. Personally, I'm like, I like that, but I'm like, you could go do that at home. I like to
Mhm.
have like really compelling music that's
Yeah.
like sometimes contemporary as well, because
Mhm.
everybody wants different sounds for different reasons. And one guy recently, he's like, "Hey, I know you switched stations because the other one you couldn't log in, but he's like, do you have that other one? Because and every other song on this other thing wasn't working." And so finally I took a minute. I'm like, oh yeah, because his nervous system couldn't regulate. He was used to the rhythm. And so
Right.
for me, I think sound is phenomenal, and
Mhm.
using it in a lot of ways is great. And then the AO scan has been a great help because there's sometimes when now flip like switching gears to like, you can do a lot of things with it, like play a frequency for anxiety, and then it can help allay someone's anxiety. You
Right.
can also play frequencies. I've used the one for parasites so often.
Yes.
They right, they people have been through all kinds of crazy detoxes, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think your limbic system, your emotional brain, and your trauma aspect, I don't think your brain's clearing that. So if we get down to a fundamental level of frequency,
Mhm.
let's see if that works, because wormwood doesn't always work, and all the other amazing parasite reduction elements out there. So then we'll play a frequency, or I had a frequency lab back in Reading, just this area in the office that I made, and so I would have little vials of water, structured vortexed water, and then I would imprint the water with the frequency for parasite, have people drink it, and so
Yep.
sometimes that would intermingle with their saliva in a way that the sound wouldn't. But yeah, people could come into states of different entrainment, different
Yeah.
resonance, and just get into a different body state.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm just all over the place here just to give that
You're
like
good.
sampler of how I use the AO scan.
Yeah.
And I'm
Love it.
leaving out like a bunch of other things, but one of my favorite like memories of using the AO scan is when I was doing a guided release, which we were talking about, like when I was doing body work, to release fascia and cranial bones and all that, which is important. But I've done this with babies, kids, and adults when people are undergoing tongue tie release surgeries
Hmm.
from providers who are trained in that. Then they're getting the frenum under the tongue removed. Or the lip or the cheeks, and somebody, if you're not aware of this, it's like, man, it's such an issue. I find
Yeah.
these issues all over the place on so many people nowadays.
Yeah.
So when we get to that moment where that is the intervention that's there, I'm like, thank God we have that.
Right.
And so what can I do to facilitate a better, more optimal outcome than perhaps would have been achieved otherwise? And so
Right.
sometimes all the body work in the world, all the prep, all the things are great, but in the room, when cranials won't unlock, or that kidney won't release, or the baby's too dysregulated, or an adult, um, I play their I play some frequencies, whatever it is, and then it helps. And I remember playing one for anxiety with somebody, and it was like she could feel trauma leave her body.
Hmm.
Another one was like I just couldn't figure out. Like usually I have 70 areas in the body that I work on to free the tongue and the floor of the mouth, but I distill it down to 4 areas. And if I can like look at those areas during a release, I can usually get the floor of the mouth to drop crazily free and loose so that the release provider can get a great release with no effort on their end. And then
Hmm.
the outcomes are much better than what they would have been otherwise. But like I just wasn't finding the right tissues. And I'm like, okay, in the moment here, it could be emotions, it could be parasite, we can't really pin it down. The release is happening. We're not going to stop it. It's in the middle of the release. So
Right.
playing that soundtrack of somebody's DNA, playing their why am I not remembering the specific
Are you talking about inner voice or?
totally,
Okay.
totally.
Yeah.
Playing the inner voice scan
Yeah.
for this baby, and it was like I couldn't get the kidney to release.
Oh, and even from a distance. I mean, I've had people call me with their babies having gone through cranio, where they're not close to me and nothing is happening and they've gone to the ER and they just don't know what's going on. And I'm like, I'll send you frequencies, like I never want to promise them anything,
Sure.
but amazingly, it's always it's always amazing and they always
Yeah.
have such great things to say. baby release, baby had a poop, baby's doing better. It's like, okay, and that is literally, like you said, it's just based on what their DNA needs at that point in time. And you don't know what that is necessarily. We're still trying to figure out how to figure all that out. And the fact that we have this at our fingertips, I mean, I tell people all the time, I think in 10 years, this is going to be as mainstream to have as people having a Fitbit watch or an Apple Watch, or any of those, like an Aura ring, or any of those things where people are tracking what's going on with their health. Except for this will be in a way that I think also gives people some of their sovereignty back, because there's so much fear. And it's like, well, if you have something that you carry in your pocket all the time that can be used to help you combat the things that you're afraid of, you're able to optimize yourself and not feel like you're living in this state of fear against things that you can't control.
Yeah, that's so good. So well said. And I love that, especially you touching on um, that remote work, virtual work, that like what you can play. And there's so much to say about that, right? We can't even like begin to talk
I know.
about how it probably too, like, it's like, I know I've heard this analogy from other bioresonance frequency practitioners, which it's like if anybody's like, okay, what is this and how does it work? And I'm like, it's like when you turn on the radio, right? You turn on the radio and you hear music. Where's that coming from, right?
Right.
How does that work? And
Oh my God.
why are we all able to tune into that? And somebody's going to get really technical and say, well, Neil, that's because of the satellite and the this. And I'm like, sure, but tell me how that works. Tell
Mm-hmm.
me from a sound engineering perspective. So you could say we can use corollary, parallel, and analog terms to describe our bodies work as antennae, and there is so much to say about that. So I feel like similarly, I remember one of my my great friends, and his wife was pregnant years ago, and she got a report back like strep B, and they've never been through that rodeo before, so he was really worried. And I'm like, hey, that's totally a concern. I'm like, let me just put her on. So I had him record her voice, sent it through, put the voice through my device so that it analyzed her vocals, and analyzed her facial features with the algorithm. Of course, this is like AI that was many years ago used, right? And it mapped those architectural features of her face along with the different intonations in the voice, and then of course her data, her information, and out of that the inner voice, came, and then but then I played the frequency for strep B, I think it must have been, and then like they got retested the next day and it was totally like clear, right? And I'm like, okay, that's like, let's just say there was like, if you add that up and say that to like time and time again, I've seen it come in huge. Um, in that case, it was like what you're saying, like that person was in Illinois, whereas
Right.
I was in California. And I
Yeah.
mean, hey, that's better than not helping. And in this case, it actually allayed their biggest concern, which was we just want to be able to have the birth that we want, and
Mhm.
sometimes those things can like play in a huge role with that. So yeah, I mean, oh, talking about frequency is so cool because, um, yeah, I feel like you're like what you said is so true. Where what we're doing now and how some of us are using that, and then there's devices out there that have made it. Like some people out there have AO scans, some people have the Healy, some
Right.
people have a bunch of other. I've the Spooky 2. I don't know if you've heard of that scalar device. Okay, when you look into these, and some people are like, how can I get a Rife machine that's not a Rife machine? Because they banned those and all this, and then now people have remade different ones and all that. Spooky 2 is a silly name, but it's actually one of the best devices out there for several $100s. That's like a box that you use to put people on. That being said, I have people I refer to for resonance technology and bioresonance and frequency work, and
Mhm.
I do it some, but like I actually was really excited to connect with you because I'm looking for people who I can like share even more. Like the good thing is, okay, with the AO scan and with frequency work in your history and all like that's it. That's all you need. You're
Yeah.
gonna be like a frequency, you know, resource for people in ways that maybe people have never known.
Yeah.
It's like an equalizer. But that being said, I feel like I'm excited to share wisdom because I just know that for me, um, like I really want to, like I really stay on a narrow path of what I'm doing so that I
Mm.
can do it uh very potently, and not only use the elements and the modalities that are the most poignant, but also like I love refer, so I'm excited to refer to you in like times ahead for your work, because of what you carry, and then also like the way you navigate, just even from what I've known of you so far. So I think it's really fun to talk about like our shared work there too.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And I was going to ask you, I know this is separate, but on the topic of frequency, I tried something a couple weeks ago that I hadn't tried before, but it's not new. I just had not heard of it. The brain tap. Have you heard of
Yeah,
this?
yeah,
This is an amazing
totally.
experience. I thought that was incredible. And of course, because, years ago when I first another story time for another day, but the whole reason I got into this is because I got sick years ago, mystery
Okay.
illness kind of thing.
Yeah,
But back then when I was trying to self-heal, I had gone through like a hypnosis and like that was semi-helpful. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start meditating and journaling. And so I had ordered something called the Silva method. Have you heard of
yeah,
this?
totally. Yeah,
And so I'm like going through the DVDs and like, yeah, I still have them. I don't think I ever went through the full thing, but listening to Jose Silva's daughter like go through the hypnosis of like
yeah,
once a week is good, twice a week is bad. And then I'm listening to this brain tap thing and I'm like, this is so like cross between Joe Dispenza stuff of what I know, frequency stuff. And I mean, and I got off of the first 20 minutes of like them just explaining what it is and you are going through. And I'm like, wow, my ears are warm. I'm like, that's amazing. That's real comforting. And then they get to a point where they're like, if your ears are warm, that's because like there's no warmth coming from it. That's something from your body. And I'm like, this is so amazing. I mean, I left there feeling like my cells were buzzing. And I'm
I
like,
love it.
so cool. I just think that as we start to get more and more into like frequency work, light work, using our own body's light for healing, it's just we are learning more about mitochondria, and that'll probably be my next rabbit hole.
Yeah,
But just how all of
totally.
that is playing into everything, the work of Beta Austin and her talking about the consciousness of water
Yeah,
and us knowing how frequency works and cymatics and how we're mostly, it's like, oh my gosh, thought, intention, all of it. I mean, on a quantum level, it makes me like geek out
yes,
because I
yeah,
get so excited about we're at this crossroads of science meeting spirituality and health and fit, like all the things that are like, oh my God, we can see why they said this and that how this is working, and it's just really cool.
yeah. And I love it too because in so many ways, like those areas were always supposed to be together in a container in the room, and we've done the thing we do, which is like take them apart. And I think kids do. Like I'm not never use this analogy, but I'm like, you know, my son Cypress, he's like 6 and he's a brilliant like disassembler of things, right? Like kids take apart something when they want to find out, like, can their fingers, can their minds, what is it? Like they want
Mhm.
to disassemble something. And I think we have disassembled so much, and I think part of that is because we're not listening to the wise elders. But I think part of it is like, sure, wise elder over there, you might say that we should not take apart this thing called life, but I need to know what life is, so I'm going to take it apart. But then we're going to put it back together, and I feel like that's what we're doing is like we're going from childlikeness to childlike awe and wonder and disassembly to
Yeah,
childlike creative making and putting together. And so these things like brain tap and I have the Mendy neurofeedback device. I just have all my stuff
oh
here
yeah,
somehow. I use, and I use um, violet light, red light, infrared light, and green light a lot, and for different reasons. And
love it.
I'm a big fan of saying like all the lights are good, but like violet light for us in the airway feeding world is pivotal. It does so many things that red doesn't. For stilling and calming nervous systems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but some people are like, can I get that laser? I'm like, you totally can. I have one that's really economical that people can get. I mean, not I, but I refer them to. But I'm like, you know what though? Purple is in the sunset. So why don't you go outside and open your mouth and get that purple light in your mouth? And people
In
are
your
like,
mouth, I
oh my
love
gosh, I never thought of that. And I'm like, yeah, we want to harness the
it.
technology of our
Natural,
bodies and of our
yes.
the nature around us.
Natural resource that's just free and always available.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it too. I think half of this is that there's a lot of people that have gone through like or are going through the healing journey, or they're going through things with their children. And it just always feels like it's like never ending, or, they constantly have to outsource. And although, yes, there's a reason to have a team of people and a village of people to help you, I also feel like I just so much want to implore people to remember that we have the things that we need. Like, yes, we can use the AO scan, we can use different light technology, we can do all these things. That is really cool that we live in a time that we can do that. We also still have natural light. We have the ground that we can go to. We have our breath. We can just focus in. We can be present. Like, we can, scream into a pillow. We can have somatic, like, getting the things out that we need to. And those are things that are free, that are available, that we can do for ourselves right now. And I think that's even why I try to tell parents, if their kids are going through issues with draining their sinuses, or if they're having issues with that. I mean, if you can't come in to see me right away, or you can't get in, I don't want parents to feel like they have to just medicate their kids when they don't know what else to do, when it could simply be that they need to release from the ears. And the parents are like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. But you know what? If your intention is right and your soft is touch, your touch is soft, I mean, then your intention is everything. Like, I want to empower parents to not feel like we're always having to outsource. That being said, I'm a practitioner and I still have to outsource. So I say that with two different heads here. You need to know when it's time to go and get somebody else, but there's also simple things that we can do at home, the same way we would help, give our kids over the counter medicine, but we can do something more natural and healing that the body actually needs, that's getting to the root of the issue more. And I'm just trying to help bridge that gap for people.
I love it. Well, it's good words of wisdom, and I always, yeah, whenever somebody says "I implore you," then first of all, good, because I always forget that word at the right time, or I sometimes do. And when you do, you're like, there's I hear your conviction and what compels you, and also
Mm-hmm.
that you love to like really be a resource for people, but also that you're not saying you need me for every single thing out there, but you
Mm-hmm.
can. You know so much. Like I really love your resourcefulness, and not a lot of people know to pull on the ears or the worlds that exist therein.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to that too, and so yeah, really. In a few minutes, I know I've got to run, and then I think it's time for you as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I kind of it's just kind of similar to where you were speaking to, in a way, like there's so much. Well, let me just say that without going into too much detail, there are people who are way more worried about will I have food and will I have air, right? That's like a grave reality that's going on right now in a lot of places, and in one way, it's like we we can make a big impact by you know recognizing what we do have and like reaching out to people and connecting with people. And I think we were talking about this like from a village mindset too. It's like you might not have a village. Some people don't. They don't have that. They're in a state of chaos, and like we need people to be humans and to love and to reach out. And but then to bring it back to like more about what we've been talking about with even like you had the tough birth and like challenge. We didn't even go into that really, but some of it we did. And I mentioned mine and the struggles that we had with miscarriage, and it's like I just remember there were some people who chose to be there and say things that were softly supportive and massively helpful. There were a couple others that they chose to take a different route. And I'm like, I don't know why they chose to actually say things that were combative, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, it will tear people down when they are in most need of help if you actually avoid empathy and support and compassion. Whereas you can construct someone and build them up, and they'll never forget those words if you reach out. So some people, they're like, Neil, I don't know, I can't fly to you, and I can't really do a virtual session. I'm like, just reach out. If I
Mm-hmm.
can say in response to one of your emails that I am so sorry for what you're going through, and why don't you try this? Then they're like, that's all I needed is
Yeah.
just even to say to
Yeah.
someone that it wasn't an echo chamber, that somebody said something back and they care. So I feel like, even if you don't have any resource and you don't know anything, I'm not talking to you, like
Yeah.
right now, but like you don't know, as a person who is your mother, father, brother, sister, healer, whatever kind of person that you are there for someone else, like
Mhm.
the sound of your voice and the intent of your voice and your heart can sometimes be the most significant part that precedes any of the other modalities or technologies, or even like you don't even have to have an answer, right? Like we
1,000%. Yeah.
need those, but sometimes we don't need the answer. We need that sound from someone's voice that's braided with love and compassion, that brings to that person the feeling of being held, supported, and safe. Then that
Yes.
might be what makes the most difference in their lives.
That's 100% true. No matter what, even in the work that I do, I tell people that all the time, that it's that is the most healing part of the whole thing. It's your body being able to finally be heard and have that space being held for it, because so much, even by ourselves, we judge what we're going through, what we're feeling, and we push it off. But it's so important to hold space for people, even if you don't have words. You don't have to have words. Sometimes people say the wrong thing because they don't know what to say and they think that it's helpful, and they don't know how to handle the space of feeling helpless and hopeless to somebody's pain. But sometimes the best thing to say is that there are no words, but I'm here for you, and just sitting with somebody while they're sitting on a hill crying in silence is enough to make a
Yeah,
big impact.
I love it. Yeah. Chris Blackwell. Hi. I love you, Chris. I love a lot of other people on here too, but I haven't talked to you. He's in Bradenton. He's near you. I don't know if he
Oh,
knows you. You
I
guys need
didn't
to
even,
know each other, Chris. Chris,
I,
you need to look up Holly. If I haven't referred you to her already, I need to. Anyways, I'll connect you. I'll like give you guys you connect. But
um,
uh boy, yeah, there's so much. I feel like you were speaking in a way that sounded like freestyle verse. Now I'm not here, Chris. But yeah, Holly's in Bradenton, so you guys will have to connect soon. I
yeah,
gotta connect you guys, and you guys gotta connect. Yeah, I knew. Yeah. Anyways, I'm so glad you attended, Chris. So yeah, so cool. Chris used to live in Santa Barbara, but then we knew them from Reading. It's crazy. So
it
yeah.
doesn't show anybody's here, and I'm not seeing any comments on my end. So I'm
Oh,
not
I'm
trying to be
so
rude.
sorry you haven't
No,
seen
it's
that.
okay. I just
I
had
have
a few.
not been
So sorry.
properly giving you like this person rolled in, that person. I don't know a lot of people. So okay, but yeah, before we don't have an end cap, I want to say, oh, you were laying down some words and saying hopeless and helpless and da da da. I'm like, that's freestyle verse. That's poetry slam. That's just put some music in the background and you've already got songs. You go back and listen to this one part where it's like a couple minutes from the end. Take that, put it to sound, and you've got the sound of the holistic alchemist coming through. So but yeah, I know we're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, even though we didn't do this on like the platform of where we were gonna originally do it, for me it's the Compromise to Alchemized podcast, and what I do for you, it's holistic alchemist. So thankful we could have this time of
Me too. Thank you for having me. Let's definitely do it again.
sounds good. All right, well let's connect soon and we'll go from there.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good. All
Okay.
right, bye.
In these conversations, we do deep dives, and resources are aplenty, so please tune in and enjoy. And I'm so excited to have you along for the journey.